let's bring KC Joyner into the conversation. A lot of Eagles and Jets stuff to kind of dive into. But first, you look at this. The Eagles were a big favorite, Casey. And look, in today's NFL, a lot of times we never know what to expect. But they took care of business. Was it an impressive win yesterday? Was it a took care of business type of win? When you see Eagles-Jets yesterday, what's your takeaway from what Philly did to the Jets?
The takeaway is that that's sort of like look at what New England did yesterday. They play, they're supposed to win big over Washington, and it took them a while, but they got there. And 33-7, they did what they're supposed to do. And you're supposed to, if you've got a team and you look at the talent disparity between the Eagles yesterday and the Jets yesterday, the Eagles are supposed to have this game, win this game handily. There was never a situation in that game where I looked at it and thought, the Eagles might lose this game. It was they're going to win this contest. This is obvious. So that's the sign of a really great team, because the great teams, or not even a great team, but a really good team, you're supposed to win those games. And if you don't win the games you're supposed to win, say like the Steelers have done over the years, and that's why they don't get the most of their talent, that's a problem. But yesterday, the Eagles did what they were supposed to do, and you got to give them credit for that, because if you're supposed to win by that much, you should. Yeah,
I mean, and a lot of people here locally, I guess, are looking at it and saying, well, their offense stuttered a little bit. Is this a sign? Is Doug holding things back? Like, I don't want to put too much out there. We were up 14-0. We were up 21-0. Do teams scale the offense back once they kind of pile up a lead a little bit?
Yeah, sure. You should go to clock ball. There's a book out that came out years ago, or an entire book this former high school and college coach who wrote about and made a great case for that the minute you get a lead in a game, you should start playing clock ball. You should try to start wearing the clock down and do things to try to win possession, things of that nature. And I think the Eagles yesterday, once they got that lead, they said, "Hey, let's not try. Why do I need to pull the really interesting things out of my playbook and try and go hit some of these big plays? We know we can just execute our offense, and we know that their offense is just atrocious. They can't pass block to save their lives. They can't run block to save their lives. So why should we bother doing anything other than try to just do the standard things we can do to succeed? So no, I'm not looking at it and saying it's a bad offensive performance. It's what they needed to do. I mean, look at the Patriots yesterday. Same idea. They did what they needed to do. They could have won that game 53-0. They put their minds to it.
Casey, MVP. A couple of years ago, Carson Wentz was playing at an MVP level. He was not really that guy last year. I'm not saying he was bad. He just was not the same guy that he was in 2017. Where is he now? When you're looking at Carson Wentz, are you seeing the guy that was closer to last year or closer to the guy in 2017?
Depends on what I mean by MVP, because there are players that, if you're looking at a Christian McCaffrey and you're comparing what Wentz is doing versus a Christian McCaffrey, I mean, Christian McCaffrey, I don't know if you saw the number that said the yards from scrimmage that he has. He's got, over a course of 5 games, he has the second highest yards from scrimmage in NFL history. Only Jim Brown in 1963 had more yards. So if you're looking at Carson Wentz and what he's doing, he's not. This does not look like an MVP season for him. You're looking at the last 2 weeks combined, he's thrown for 349 yards. And if people are talking about him being that way because he's executing the offense and getting the things done that he needs to get done, that people are still putting him in that conversation shows that they realize how good of a player he is. But I think the idea that he is centric to this offense, as great as he is, the Eagles prove that they've got the kind of setup. When you win the Super Bowl with the backup quarterback, you prove you've got that kind of setup that you don't need an MVP candidate. So I don't think they're built to make him an MVP candidate, but I like the idea of people are recognizing that his skill set is of MVP caliber.
Also, I mean, while we're on the topic of the Eagles and the NFC East, Washington, they fire their coach. Wentz, the Eagles traded up to go get him, and it was a move that really has changed the franchise. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't realize is, well, maybe they do realize, Washington's got problems, and it starts at the top.
It does. I always think of Washington, and a quick history lesson here. Back in the 40s, Bear Bryant, the famous Alabama coach, maybe the greatest college coach of all time, the Washington owner at the time, a guy named George Preston Marshall, he made an offer to Bear Bryant. Hey, come work for me. Be my head coach. Bryant realized that George Preston Marshall, he wouldn't follow the rule that they have in football, where owners own, or in pro football, owners own, coaches coach, players play, scouts scout. When you stick to that, it tends to work. When the owner tries to scout or the owner tries to coach, you probably got some problems. He realized that Marshall was going to be like that. That's what Washington has right now. They've got an owner. who wants to, there's that famous story where he sent the defensive coordinator a bunch of quarts of vanilla ice cream and it was melting on his desk because he said, I don't like vanilla defenses. And he did it again a couple weeks later when he thought the defensive coordinator still wasn't giving a point. He's trying to coach. There's talk that he was the guy who picked Haskins, that the rest of the organization did not want to take Haskins, and the owner did. He's trying to scout. So if your owner's trying to scout and your owner's trying to coach, then your scouts and your coaches all can't do their jobs as effectively. And the Eagles fans should be thankful every day of the year because Jeffrey Lurie doesn't want to coach and he doesn't want to scout. He gets involved in all those processes, but he realizes, I hired these people to go do their jobs. I'm going to let them go do their jobs. And Eagles fans should be thankful 7 days a week that Jeffrey Lurie is the owner of their team.
Easy win over the Jets, and the Jets got all sorts of problems, but really a solid win by the Birds. What about their defense yesterday? Can you take anything with Falk playing quarterback?
You can't really. Again, if you get 10 sacks, if you can get those sacks, that team, you shouldn't get 10 sacks even in a situation like that. So, yeah, I can get that situation to go. If I looked at it coming into the game, he'd say, if they got 6 sacks, I'd be like, that's a great number. To get 10, I mean, remember Jacksonville did it a couple years ago where they were getting 10 sacks a couple times a year, and it just showed what the ceiling of their defense was. So I like the idea that the Eagles established that our pass rush ceiling can be double-digit sacks when things are correct, because that says you've got a really good pass rush.
Well, that, and then Scandrick with the big game yesterday, they brought him off the street. I mean, there was a lot of concern going into this game about that secondary. Is it that the secondary stepped up, or was it, again, the Jets are that bad?
I think that once you got the lead, the Eagles could sit back and play shell coverages and say, we're not going to let you beat us deep. We're going to play coverages that aren't going to allow you to single out individual players. Because if you've got coverage weaknesses, the other team still has to get you manned up in those situations. And if you just don't allow that to happen and say, fine, you complete stuff underneath, and then we're just going to go ahead and tackle you. If that's the case, then you don't have those coverage weaknesses as much. So I think it's a little bit of both. But Scandrick doing what he did yesterday, that may give them some unexpected depth.
All right, KC Joyner, let's look at Week 5 in the NFL and see what we think we know now. I don't know that we ever think we know what we really know, but let's find out what we think we know. I don't think anybody cares if the Cardinals beat the Bengals, but number one, how bad are the Bengals? And number two, what do you think of Murray?
I think that I like what they did with Murray yesterday. I like what they got on that 4th down and goal like at the 2-yard line, and they let him go ahead and try and run the ball and touchdown. I like what they're doing offensively with him. He's making progress. I think that Kingsbury's doing a better job than people are giving credit for, and Murray is too, because you're seeing week-to-week progress. And Cincinnati, it's just a matter of you can't lose as much talent as they've lost, especially in the offensive line, to keep things going.
Bills, Titans, not a pretty game. Don't know what to think of the Titans. They win big, they lose bad. I mean, they're at home, they lose, they go on the road, they win. It's such a hard team to figure out. But Buffalo's 4-1. Shouldn't they be the story here?
They should be the story. The Titans don't play to their talent level on a consistent basis. I won't say they Tomlin, because they don't just play down to their talent level. The opponent, they can mix back and forth, like you just said. But for the Bills, yes, the Bills are a formula team. They can only win in certain types of formulas, and this is going to be a recurring theme. If you can play power football, it doesn't matter what else you could do. If you can play power football really well, you can win all the time in the NFL, and that's what the Bills can do. And power football still works, even in the pass-happy NFL today.
And I guess McDermott, a defensive-minded guy, we know him here in Philly. He kind of got ran out of town, to be honest with you, but he has bounced around and seemingly is starting to mold the team in the way that he wants them, a defensive-minded team that are going to win close games.
Yes, they are, and they've got. I love the idea that they've got a three-headed backfield. They can run the ball when they want to. Their offensive blocking has been good in the ground game. Pass blocking, not so much. I mean, they just need, if they were getting average quarterback play or adequate quarterback play, and they may be getting it. Let's say they got above average. Let's say they got B-level quarterback play. That's a Super Bowl contender. It's just they got a C quarterback now. He needs to move up to the next level.
All right, Bears. Raiders, very disappointed here. I had the Bears as my lock of the week. I thought their defense would overwhelm a pedestrian Raiders offense. What happened in London?
The Raiders were able to get their ground game going, and I said last week when I mentioned we were talking about Chicago, Minnesota, and that I thought it was a huge upset that Chicago won with Chase Daniel under center, and I really didn't think he was, and then I said, okay, well, maybe he's better than I thought he was and things. No, he was just as bad as the initial thought was, that he's just not that good of a quarterback. The drop-off from Trubisky, who's not a great quarterback, but a solid quarterback, to Daniel is too significant for Chicago to overcome, because I think if they had Trubisky in that contest, they win the thing handily.
All right, let's go to New Orleans. Many people wondered, can they keep it afloat without Drew Brees? Teddy Bridgewater is showing why he was a Pro Bowler, and the Bucs fought hard in that game, but they come up just short. Are the Saints the best team in the NFC?
The Saints probably are the best team in the NFC, and the Bucs, it shows their defense is really, they still have tons of coverage issues in their secondary. And Bridgewater, as I mentioned 1,000 times, he passed all the Parcells rules for quarterbacks coming out of college. Those Parcells rules, if you pass all of them, the success rate of players becoming franchise quarterbacks is really high. Maybe he doesn't get to be a franchise quarterback, but he's the best backup in the NFL, and that's why they're 3-0 with him.
Giants had been playing better, but at home yesterday, they had a tough day against the Vikings. I mean, a step up in competition for the Giants. And, Cousins had a good game, 22, 27, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. Cook ran all over, but Thielen, the return, 7 for 130, 2 touchdowns. Vikings normalized the offense a little bit. They weren't so run-heavy yesterday. And the Giants, obviously, they're better, but they're not ready to take that big jump in competition.
Not yet. I kind of thought they might be. I picked it for a potential upset in that contest, but they still have big coverage issues in their secondary. They got 2 cornerbacks who are green-rated cornerbacks, and Minnesota showed that we think we've got a personnel matchup that we can go after, if we think that there's somebody we can target in the secondary, we'll trust Cousins to make those kinds of plays. So I think it speaks well for them that they're going to open the offense up in those situations, because you got to be able to take advantage of it, and they did. So it really Minnesota's prospects for the rest of the season stronger.
Ravens on the road, they win, but the Steelers are down to their 3rd quarterback. What do we learn about Lamar Jackson, and what's this mean for the Steelers season?
The Steelers season, my son is a big Steelers fan. We watch the games together, and it's tough because they've lost so much talent. When you can't lose as many players as they've lost and still be the same team, and yet they were close to being able to pull off an upset in that contest. For Jackson, it does show that they can play different types of games, that he can be a money quarterback late in a contest, that he's not just hey, I'm playing Miami so I can throw 5 touchdowns. No, he's a quarterback who can do a lot of different things. And being that they've got their passing game where now they've got a Hollywood Brown who can go deep, they've got a Mark Andrews, they've got the kind of vertical capabilities, I think it makes them a more well-rounded team, and it gives them maybe 2 or 3 different ways to win, which makes them dangerous.
All right, Redskins lose. They get blown out at home. They were up in that game 7-6 after 1, but the Patriots ran away with them, and it got Gruden fired.
It did, and I thought it was going to take a 43-7, 45-7 game to get him fired, but this wasn't enough. They're just not a very good team, but they've got a lot of personnel problems, and I don't think coaching was the problem, but at this point, the team is probably checked out in the coach, so you need to check out the coach. But they just need an owner who's going to hire a strong general manager and a good coach and get out of the way. They had it with Jack Kemp for years, and if they get that kind of situation back, they'll get there. But if not, the 9-7 is going to be their ceiling.
Now, I got the list of Vegas odds for the next head coach. Eric Bieniemy is at the top of the list, followed by Byron Leftwich, Mike Pettin, and down there on that list I see Jim Schwartz as a guy, but a lot of interesting names like Brian Schottenheimer. Did they have his father there? That didn't go so well. Matt Rule. So it'll be interesting to see which way they go for the next head coach in Washington. Do you have a guess?
I would bet that they just had an offensive coach. I bet they go for a defensive coach. Or if I had to guess, because usually they're going to say, well, that didn't work, let's go in the other direction. Or they're going to try and get somebody who they think will be the best to coach up Haskins. But if Haskins is this much into his career, and again, hey, look, not everybody's Daniel Jones, not everybody's ready to come out, go right off the bat and get into the starting lineup. But the rumors about Haskins are, at least what you read between the lines by Haskins, is he's really far away. And if he's that far away this quickly, then maybe they think they need an offensive coach. But I would be surprised if they didn't go defense.
All right, Panthers win. They've won 3 without Cam Newton. Jaguars fall 34-27. Minshew has a big game, but it's Kyle Allen who gets the win, even though Minshew outperformed him. Carolina, 3 straight.
Yeah, 3 straight. I haven't seen much of the skinny on McCaffrey's injury because he went out of the game. Reggie Van Affen came in there and it ran off some big plays. But that shows you something, too, that they could still get big plays out of a backup running back. Now, if McCaffrey is not banged up and things, it shows that he is the sort of player that can carry the team. My problem with that is that if you get a guy like him and you're giving him 400 touches, he will eventually get banged up. And if the backup doesn't hold up as well as it looked like he did yesterday, and you get some problems. So I like Carolina's doing well, but I think they need to figure a way to get something more done besides him.
I'm Dan Quinn. I'm a defensive-minded coach. I give up 53. I score 32, but I lose. Do I feel like I'm next?
He should, because, they hired him to be the great defensive coach, and the offense just hasn't. I do fantasy stuff, too, and I keep him from fantasy managers. I have a couple, 3 times this year. I'm so frustrated with Matt Ryan. It's like, Matt Ryan's not the problem in fantasy. He's not the problem of the Falcons. The Falcons' offense, again, you put up 32, you should be able to do well enough. And that defense, when I look at Atlanta's defense, I don't see a defense that should be that bad. Desmond Trufant and Isaiah Oliver and Demonte Casey, and all those are good quarterbacks. They do have problems in their with their safeties and things, but I don't care if you have backup safeties, you still shouldn't give up 53.
Yeah, and by the way, Watson was 5 touchdowns, 426. How come that team can't be more consistent? What is their major malfunction, I guess, where they can't beat Carolina at home last week? To me, that's baffling.
It is, and I think part of it is that they want to be. I think they want to be one type of team, and then they end up having to be another type of team. I don't think they try to avoid shootout games. I don't think they want to be that and that sort of. And I get that you shouldn't try and get into shootout games because we talked many times to 50-50 propositions. But I think that they don't want to get in those situations, and when they have to, they will. But I think they need to decide this is the type of team that we are, or at least go game plan wise into it, because I think that they fight what they need to be oftentimes versus what they should be.
Let's go to what's going on with the Chargers. People thought this could be their year. This is the Super Bowl team. I know they've had a couple guys out, but the Broncos go into your place. I know it's not a great home field advantage, but get their first win of the year. What's going on with the Chargers?
Hey, the head coach said it himself. Anthony Lynn said, we didn't put out a good enough effort. He said we got out-coached. He didn't just throw his players in the bus. He said, hey, we got out-coached, but they didn't give a good enough effort. It's bad when it's week 5, but how many times have we said this about the Chargers, where they'll start the season bad and do well as the season progresses? Something about that organization does not allow them to get off to good early starts, and they look like they were going to beat that this year, but they haven't. But if Lynn is saying the team's not playing as hard as it can, that's partly on him. And again, he's telling the players, if you don't step up, I'm going to start making some changes. But that's a bad sign 5 weeks in season.
NFL Insider KC Joyner recapping week 5. Packers 34, Dallas 24. How did the Packers go into your building and beat you up like that? It was 24-0 before the Cowboys finally woke up. To me, I look at the sidelines of this game and wonder, Jason Garrett and his offensive staff, they got out. They just totally let his team down, I thought.
They did, and everybody's saying of the first few weeks of the season, all right, is Dallas really this good? Or is it just because they played weak competition? And I think it's because they played weak competition. And mind you, the Packers they've had some struggles early in the season as well, but now we've seen a couple games in a row where it's Rodgers, and now he's got all this Scantling. He has, think about it, they put up all those points, but they don't have Adams. Imagine when they get Adams back. If they had him in that game, they could have put up 40 in that contest or more. And it shows you what the Packers' offense is. And I think LaFleur and Rodgers are finally getting on the same page. And if that's the case, because LaFleur's a real good play caller, that's scary for the rest of the league, because that's a team that can put up 40 every contest.
All right, Sunday night, we had the Colts beat the Chiefs at Arrowhead. The Colts lose at home to the Raiders the week before. So I don't know what the domino effect here. Are the Raiders better than we think? What's happened with the Colts? What happened to the Chiefs if they lost? There's so many crazy questions that spawn off of each game each week. But to go into Arrowhead on primetime Sunday Night Football and win, what about the Colts?
The Colts, it's interesting that, first off, they're building a great offensive line, and Brissett, it allows them to protect for Brissett. And when you give him plenty of protection, you can get a lot of things done. But also, yesterday I saw a buddy of mine named Mike Sando. He posted on Twitter that he had a stat that the Colts only had one explosive passing play, that's 15 or more yards downfield, and he gave up 10. And that's like the first time in 25 years, first time in a very long period of time that a team has won under those circumstances. But that's what the Colts are. And they did it without their best defensive player, Darius Leonard, who was out with concussion. They have the kind of defense that can go slugfest. They can have an offensive line that can go play slugfest. They can play smash mouth, vertical-based football. And the Chiefs right now, they showed yesterday they couldn't do that. And there's a couple weeks in a row where their offense hasn't looked quite as good, and teams are starting to figure out how to slow things down. And now they got a banged-up offensive line, and Mahomes is hurt. I got questions about the Chiefs.
Monday Night Football coming up at 8 o'clock tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Right after the countdown to kickoff show, Tony Bruno and the company are coming up with us after us in about 20 minutes from now from the Landmark in Glassboro. But first, KC Joyner, 49ers, Browns. Now, a lot of hype about the Browns. Niners are undefeated. I said earlier today, I feel like the Niners are this year's Bears, where it's just like, I don't believe in them, I don't believe in them, I don't believe in them. I guess I kind of have to believe in them. What do you think of this game tonight?
Another smash mouth football team. That's who they are. They use the fullback more than any other team in the league. They believe in getting a lot of power up front and running a lot of smash mouth football, and will go vertical. And I've said this many times that when it comes to play calling creativity, you're not going to find a more creative play call than a Kyle Shanahan. He does things in his scheme and route combinations that I haven't seen any other coaches do, or at least nowhere near as effectively as he does. And I think that they're going to smash mouth Cleveland in a way that Cleveland's not going to be ready for, and I think they're going to win this contest, I don't know, 24-17, something like that.
Very interesting. Week 5 ends tonight with that game there. By the way, kicking musical chairs in the NFL. I mean, it is so hard to find a kicker anymore. The Titans missed 4 yesterday. They cut their kicker. We know that the Patriots had to find a new kicker. The kicking game could be a big factor in these playoffs this year. Just keep an eye on that with all that's going on. KC Joyner's back on Friday with a preview of the matchups to watch in the Eagles-Vikings matchup. This is a big one. This one will be a much more interesting game than the Sunday. I felt I got robbed, and then my NFL Sunday got taken from me because of the Jets, Casey. Those teams are killing the NFL.
They are, and it shows that the quarterback depth, that all it takes is a few quarterbacks to get knocked out. And because, look, if Darnold's out there, it's a different game. But if you start getting back up in third-string quarterbacks, it starts to change the dynamic of everything. Look at Pittsburgh. Even they had third-string quarterback, kept it close, but I don't think they could do it with a third-string quarterback for very long.
KC Joyner, of course, each and every Monday and Friday, only on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, pal.
Appreciate it.